What if the ending of one hero's story quietly triggered the destruction of the entire multiverse? And now, everything, from Avengers to X-Men to Doctor Doom, is connected in a war that decides which reality survives? I've been thinking about this a lot lately, especially after everything we've seen and the hints we're getting now. Because this isn't just another Marvel movie setup. This feels like something much bigger, something that's been building silently since the moment Steve Rogers chose to stay behind and live a life outside his timeline. In this video, I'm going to break down how that single decision may have fractured reality itself, how that fracture turned into dangerous incursions between worlds, and why that's exactly how the X-Men are finally entering the main timeline. But more importantly, I'm going to connect all of this to the rise of Doctor Doom, someone who doesn't just want to stop the chaos, but control it by creating an entirely new reality. We'll explore why Avengers and X-Men are shown fighting each other, what Thor has already realized about Doom's power, and how Steve Rogers might return not just as a hero, but as the key to everything. And by the end, we'll piece together how all of this could lead to a massive loss, where the heroes fail, and Doom creates Battle World. I keep going back to that quiet scene, the one where Steve Rogers finally lets go of the shield and chooses a life that was never meant to be his. At first glance, it feels complete, almost poetic. A hero stepping out of time to live inside it. But the more I think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. Because time, in this universe, was never meant to be rewritten so casually. Steve didn't just live a life, he stayed in a timeline that wasn't originally his. And that single decision created a ripple. Not an immediate explosion, not a visible tear, but something far more dangerous. A fracture, a slow, silent crack forming beneath reality itself, spreading across timelines like invisible lightning, waiting for the right moment to surface. And that crack has a name. Incursion. Two realities drifting too close, brushing against each other like unstable particles, until eventually they collide. What fascinates me is that incursions aren't random disasters, they're consequences. The universe correcting itself in the most violent way possible. And Steve, unknowingly, became the center of that imbalance. He didn't break time out of arrogance or desperation. He did it for peace. But peace, in a system as delicate as the multiverse, can be just as destructive as war. Because when one timeline bends, another has to compensate. And that compensation begins as a tremor, before it becomes a collision. At the same time, something else has been quietly waiting in the shadows, a completely different reality, a world where mutants have always existed, evolving, growing, struggling in isolation. The X-Men weren't absent from the main timeline, they were sealed away in their own, hidden not by coincidence, but by design. Their existence is tied to something deeper than genetics. Their powers aren't just mutations, they are expressions of multiversal energy itself, living anomalies. And when the first incursion begins, it doesn't just connect two worlds, it awakens something within theirs, a resonance. Like their universe was always meant to collide with another. The moment these two realities touch, everything changes. Not just physically, but fundamentally. Energies begin to overlap, laws of physics start to blur, and suddenly, people who should never have met are standing face to face. But this isn't a peaceful meeting. It's confusion, fear, and instinct. Because when two worlds collide, survival becomes the only language. And this is where we begin to see the seeds of conflict. Avengers looking at mutants not as allies, but as unknown variables. Mutants seeing the Avengers as threats to their already fragile existence. The tension isn't forced, it's inevitable. Two realities trying to occupy the same space cannot coexist without consequences. And then, right when everything feels like it's spiraling out of control, he arrives. Not as a savior, not even as a conqueror, but as someone who understands what's happening better than anyone else. Dr. Doom. What makes him terrifying isn't just his power, it's his clarity. While everyone else is reacting to the chaos, Doom already sees the end game. He knows incursions cannot be stopped. They can only be controlled, managed, directed. And control in a collapsing multiverse requires sacrifice. Entire worlds erased so that others can survive. It's a brutal equation, one that no hero is willing to accept, but Doom isn't bound by morality, he's bound by logic. What chills me is the way Doom approaches this. He doesn't rush, he doesn't panic, he hunts. Moving across collapsing realities, identifying individuals whose power is tied to the fabric of existence itself. Because to reshape reality, you don't just need strength, you need anchors. Beings whose existence stabilizes timelines, and that brings us back to Steve Rogers. Because somewhere along the way, Steve stopped being just a man out of time, and became something much bigger, an anchor being. A living connection between multiple timelines. His existence is holding pieces of the multiverse together without anyone realizing it. But that also makes him a problem. Because as long as Steve exists, the timelines can't fully merge. They remain tethered, resisting complete collapse. Doom needs him, but he also needs him gone. It's a paradox. One that forces Doom to make a choice that defines his entire plan. Capture the anchor, use his energy, and then eliminate him to finalize the new reality. It's cold, calculated, and horrifyingly necessary from Doom's perspective. Meanwhile, Steve himself doesn't even know what he's become. He just feels the world slipping, moments repeating, memories overlapping. Like time is no longer moving forward, but folding in on itself. As all of this unfolds, the mutants begin to understand something even more disturbing. Their existence isn't just part of the problem. It might be the origin of it, that cosmic anomaly tied to their powers. The very thing that makes them unique is also what destabilizes the multiverse when their reality is threatened. They weren't just hidden away for safety, they were contained. And now that containment is breaking. Leaders among them start to realize that fixing this might mean sacrificing their own world. Imagine carrying that weight. Knowing that your entire species might have to disappear to save everything else. And this is where the chaos truly ignites. Because now we have three forces moving toward the same point, each with a completely different goal. The Avengers, trying to restore balance without sacrificing innocent lives. The mutants, struggling between survival and responsibility. And Doom, pushing forward with a plan that demands absolute control. And in the middle of it all, we start seeing glimpses of something even bigger. Conflicts that feel personal, almost symbolic. Yelena facing Mystique, not just a fight of skill, but identity versus identity. Gambit clashing with Shang-Chi 2 warriors shaped by entirely different worlds, now forced into the same battlefield. But the moment that stays with me the most is Thor. Not charging into battle, not leading with strength, but trying to hold everything together. He's seen gods fall, worlds burn, and yet this is different. Because this isn't a war you can win with power alone. When Doom stops Stormbreaker with just 2 fingers, it's more than a display of strength. It's a statement. Thor realizes something in that moment, that this enemy cannot be defeated alone. And that realization changes everything. For the first time, he steps into a different role. Not just a warrior, but a unifier, bringing together Avengers, X-Men, and even the Fantastic Four. And just when it feels like hope is forming, the impossible happens. Steve Rogers returns, not as the man we remember, but as someone who has seen what his decision has done. There's a quiet weight to him now, a realization that the life he chose came at a cost far greater than he ever imagined, and yet he doesn't hesitate. Because if he is the anchor, then he also might be the key. The one person who can stabilize everything long enough for a solution to exist. And so, alongside Thor, he steps into leadership once again, not to fight for victory, but to fight for time itself. The final battle isn't just massive, it's overwhelming. Realities collapsing in real time, environments shifting mid-fight, characters phasing between worlds. Every decision matters, every second counts, and yet, despite everything, Doom stays ahead. Because he's not trying to win the battle, he's trying to complete the equation. And in the end, that's exactly what he does. The heroes fight with everything they have, and they still lose. Not because they were weak, but because Doom was right. The multiverse couldn't be saved. It had to be rebuilt. And from that destruction, something new emerges. A single reality, battle world, a patchwork existence made from fragments of destroyed timelines. Familiar, yet completely different. Some remember what came before, others don't. Lives rewritten, histories altered. And somewhere within it all, Doom stands not as a villain, but as a ruler, a god emperor who carries the burden of every world that was lost. But even here, something feels unfinished. Because shadows of the past still linger, small cracks, tiny inconsistencies. Like the multiverse isn't truly gone, just waiting. So when I look back at that quiet ending again, I don't see peace anymore. I see the beginning of everything. A single choice that led to infinite consequences. The moment old Steve Rogers sat beside that lake at the end of Endgame, I always felt Marvel was hiding something from us. Everybody looked at that scene like it was a peaceful goodbye, but every single time I watched it again, I noticed fear inside Steve's eyes. Not relief, not satisfaction, fear. And now, after that first glimpse from Avengers Doomsday, showing a young Steve Rogers again with his son beside him, I honestly think the truth was sitting in front of us the whole time. What if the ending of Endgame was never really the ending? What if it was actually the beginning of the next disaster? Just imagine this for a second. Sam Wilson, Bucky Barnes, and Smart Hulk are standing near the quantum tunnel exactly where Endgame ended. They are waiting for Steve to return the Infinity Stones. Bruce is checking the monitors nervously. Sam is pretending to stay calm, and Bucky already knows something feels wrong. Minutes pass, then more minutes. Steve still does not return. You can almost hear panic rising in the silence. Suddenly the timeline shakes, not literally at first, but something feels broken. Then, instead of old Steve appearing on the bench, another version of Steve crashes into the scene first. Young Steve Rogers, bruised, bleeding, running for his life. The reason this opening would work perfectly is because it instantly changes the meaning of Endgame forever. Marvel loves circular storytelling. They always connect endings to beginnings. And this theory feels exactly like the kind of emotional trap Kevin Feige would pull on us. Young Steve would not arrive calmly through the quantum tunnel. He would appear from a collapsing portal somewhere near the trees, almost thrown into the timeline like reality itself rejected him. His suit would be damaged badly, his shield cracked across the center, and he would look terrified in a way we have never seen before. Not scared for himself, scared of what is chasing him. Bucky would immediately recognize that expression because Steve only looked like that once before, during the war against Thanos. Sam would rush toward him asking questions, but before Steve can explain anything, he would look directly toward the woods and whisper one name: Doom. I can already picture the silence after that word. Bruce would stop moving entirely. Sam would slowly loosen his grip on Steve's shoulder. Even old Steve sitting nearby would lift his head because somehow he already knows exactly who is coming. That is where the entire atmosphere changes from confusion into pure horror. Now here is where the theory becomes absolutely insane. Old Steve sitting on the bench was never supposed to be there yet. Think about it carefully. In Endgame, we accepted that old Steve simply lived his life in another timeline and returned peacefully later. But Marvel never explained how he appeared on the bench without using the platform. They ignored the rules of their own time travel system on purpose. What if old Steve did not return naturally at all? What if he was hiding there? Imagine old Steve witnessing the younger version of himself crash into the timeline while realizing the multiverse has finally caught up to him. Suddenly, his peaceful retirement becomes a desperate attempt to avoid detection. I genuinely think old Steve already knows Dr. Doom has been hunting him across realities for years. That would explain the sadness in his face during Endgame. It was not retirement, it was guilt. He knew eventually the timelines would collide again. The craziest detail is the teaser showing young Steve with his son. Marvel would never reveal something that massive unless it was emotionally connected to the main conflict. Maybe young Steve is not from the sacred timeline at all. Maybe he comes from the reality where Steve stayed with Peggy and built a family instead of returning immediately. That changes everything. If this version of Steve created an entirely separate branch reality by staying with Peggy, then Dr. Doom suddenly has a reason to hunt him specifically. Doom is obsessed with controlling realities. In the comics, he sees broken timelines as weaknesses that threaten existence itself. So imagine Doom discovering that Steve Rogers accidentally created one of the most unstable branches in the multiverse simply because he chose love over duty. That branch reality could become the center of a multiversal collapse. And honestly, that feels emotionally brutal enough for Marvel to use. Young Steve would not just be running for his own survival. He would be trying to save his son. Think about how heartbreaking that sounds. Steve Rogers, the man who always sacrificed personal happiness for the world, finally chooses a family, and that exact decision becomes the trigger for another catastrophe. I can already imagine Steve carrying guilt for every destroyed universe behind him while trying to protect the only thing he truly loved. That is why he would appear desperate and beaten when he arrives near the quantum tunnel. He has already lost worlds before reaching the Avengers. And the moment he says Doom is coming, old Steve realizes the war he escaped from has finally returned to finish the job. Then comes the scene I truly believe Marvel is building toward. The forest suddenly becomes unnaturally silent. Even the air changes. Smart Hulk steps forward first because Bruce still believes logic can solve this situation. Bucky immediately reaches for his weapon while Sam positions himself between both Steves. And somewhere behind them, old Steve slowly stands beside the bench, almost accepting fate. Then Dr. Doom appears, not with some giant explosion, not through a loud portal, just walking calmly from the darkness. That is what would make the moment terrifying. Doom should feel inevitable, not dramatic. His armor would already look damaged from previous battles across timelines, showing that he has been hunting Steve for a very long time. Young Steve would instantly panic because he knows what Doom can do. Bruce tries speaking first, probably asking who he is, but Doom ignores him completely. One blast sends Smart Hulk flying backward into the quantum machinery. Bucky attacks next without hesitation, but Doom catches the metal arm mid-punch and crushes the ground beneath him. The entire sequence should feel hopeless immediately. No heroic buildup, no preparation, just destruction. Then Doom grabs Sam Wilson by the throat and lifts him effortlessly while staring directly at both versions of Steve Rogers standing near that bench. That visual alone would become one of the greatest opening scenes Marvel has ever created, because it transforms the Endgame ending into a nightmare. Imagine old Steve watching Sam suffer while knowing he passed the shield to him, believing the world was finally safe. Meanwhile, young Steve is standing there, realizing his mistakes destroyed another generation of heroes. Captain America's watching helplessly from opposite sides of their lives, one filled with regret for the future, one filled with regret for the past, and Doom standing between them like the physical embodiment of consequence. I honestly think Doom would not even attack Sam out of anger. He would do it to force Steve into making a choice, which Steve survives. The old man who abandoned the timeline, or the younger man who created a dangerous branch reality? Doom would see both versions as anomalies poisoning existence itself. That is why this theory connects perfectly with the multiverse saga themes. Every Marvel project lately keeps asking whether changing reality for personal reasons eventually destroys everyone else. Wanda did it. Loki did it. Strange did it. And now Steve Rogers may have done the same thing years earlier without understanding the consequences. Suddenly, Endgame becomes less about victory and more about delayed collapse, waiting patiently in the shadows. What makes this even darker is the possibility that old Steve has been hiding information from everyone for decades. Think about his behavior carefully. When Sam asks him about his married life, Steve refuses to explain anything. At first it seemed emotional and private, but now it feels suspicious. Maybe he stayed silent because speaking about that timeline could expose it. Maybe he understood the multiverse was fragile and revealing details might attract attention. Dr. Doom finding him at the exact Endgame location cannot be coincidence. That lake becomes symbolic. It is the place where Steve tried escaping responsibility forever. So when Doom attacks there, it is almost like destiny correcting itself. I also think young Steve arriving injured tells us he already fought Doom multiple times before reaching this point. That means entire universes may have already fallen off screen before the movie even begins. Marvel rarely starts films with heroes already defeated unless they want the villain to feel unstoppable immediately. And honestly, Dr. Doom deserves that kind of introduction. Thanos arrived like a conqueror. Doom should arrive like Judgment itself. Calm, intelligent, unstoppable, almost disappointed in humanity for forcing him to clean up their mistakes. That attitude would instantly separate him from every previous Marvel villain. There is another detail people are ignoring completely. Why would young Steve appear with his son in promotional footage unless the child matters directly to the story? Marvel knows fans would explode emotionally seeing Steve as a father. They would never waste that reveal for simple nostalgia. I think the son becomes the emotional center of Doomsday. Maybe Doom is not hunting Steve alone. Maybe he is hunting the child because that boy represents a multiversal anomaly powerful enough to threaten reality. If Steve lived an entirely different life after Endgame, his son technically should not exist according to the sacred timeline. That makes the child living proof of a broken reality. And if Doom believes destroying unstable branches is necessary to save existence, then suddenly his actions become terrifyingly understandable. That is what great Marvel villains always do. They force us to question whether they might actually be right. Imagine young Steve begging the Avengers to protect his son while old Steve watches silently, realizing every disaster started because he wanted one lifetime of happiness with Peggy Carter. I swear that emotional conflict feels exactly like the direction Marvel wants now. Less simple good versus evil, more impossible moral choices tearing heroes apart from inside. The opening fight itself could become emotionally devastating if Marvel stages it correctly. Sam struggling in Doom's grip while refusing to surrender the shield would mirror Steve refusing to kneel before Thanos years earlier. Bucky trying desperately to protect Sam despite being injured would remind us how much Steve's legacy changed him. Bruce transforming fully into Hulk again after seeing his friends destroyed could symbolize the Avengers losing control immediately. But the most powerful moment would belong to old Steve. I can see him slowly picking up the shield one final time, even with trembling hands, not because he believes he can win, but because he understands this disaster started with him. Young Steve would probably scream for him not to fight because he already knows Doom cannot be stopped through strength alone. Yet old Steve stepping forward anyway would perfectly complete his character arc. Steve Rogers always jumps on the grenade, even when he knows it will kill him. And imagine Doom looking almost respectful toward him in that moment. Not hatred, respect. Because Doom understands sacrifice better than most villains ever could, that complexity would elevate the scene beyond a normal superhero battle and turn it into a collision between duty, guilt, and destiny itself. I also believe the quantum tunnel will become the center of the entire conflict after this opening. Doom attacking specifically at that location cannot be random. The tunnel represents humanity interfering with time itself. If Doom wants to control or destroy unstable timelines, then eliminating the Avengers at their greatest scientific achievement makes perfect sense. Bruce would probably realize during the fight that Doom somehow tracked Steve through quantum energy signatures connected to the Infinity Stones. Remember, Steve carried all the 6 stones across realities. That means he may have unknowingly left traces at everywhere he traveled. Those traces could function like scars across the multiverse, allowing Doom to follow him through collapsing realities until finally reaching the sacred timeline. Those details explain why Doom would appear when both Steves exist together. Suddenly, the emotional reunion scene from Endgame transforms into a multiversal beacon calling disaster directly toward Earth. That kind of retroactive storytelling is something Marvel absolutely loves doing. They take a familiar emotional moment and reveal it had horrifying consequences nobody understood at the time. The more I think about it, the more convinced I become that old Steve returning at the end of Endgame was secretly the first incursion event of the new saga. Everything fits too perfectly. Loki breaking the timeline, Strange dream walking through realities, Wanda destroying universes, Kang manipulating history, and now Steve accidentally splitting reality permanently by choosing another life. Marvel has been building one giant theme the entire time. Every attempt to escape pain creates larger consequences later. Steve wanted peace after endless war, but his decision may have destabilized existence itself. That is tragic in the most beautiful way possible because it does not ruin his character. It makes him human. For once, Captain America chose something selfish, and the universe punished everyone for it. I honestly think audiences would connect emotionally with that conflict far more than another simple invasion story. It transforms Doomsday into a deeply personal disaster tied directly to the emotional ending fans already love. And seeing young Steve and old Steve together during that realization would be heartbreaking. One represents hope before sacrifice. The other represents sacrifice after hope. Doom, standing between them, forces both versions to confront the damage caused by their choices across time itself. By the final act of the movie, I think both Steves will finally understand Doom's real objective. He is not destroying realities for power alone. He is trying to stop the multiverse from collapsing entirely. That is what makes this theory so interesting to me, because Doom may actually believe Steve Rogers is the central fracture threatening existence. Every timeline connected to Steve after Endgame could be destabilizing reality further, especially the branch where he raised a family. The emotional twist would be realizing Doom is not entirely wrong. Maybe saving the multiverse truly requires one version of Steve Rogers to disappear forever. And imagine the emotional weight if old Steve chooses to sacrifice himself willingly while young Steve protects his son and escapes with the remaining Avengers. That would beautifully mirror Endgame while still moving the story forward. Old Steve finally accepts responsibility for breaking reality, and young Steve receives one last chance to protect the family he fought so hard to keep. I can already picture old Steve facing Doom alone beside that same lake while the sun rises behind them. No massive armies, no explosions, just two exhausted men carrying impossible burdens. Honestly, that feels more cinematic than anything Marvel has done recently, and it perfectly honors the emotional legacy of Endgame without replacing it.